Welcome back, Gene, to Exopolitics Today.
Thank you, Dr. Saul. It's an honor to be back. Thank you for re-inviting me back to your platform.
Well, it's great to have you back, Gene. People really appreciate your level of knowledge, your kind of 20 plus years in the Navy, your understanding of the nuances of special forces operation. Sorry. I'll have to do that again. Third time's a charm. I'll make it short. Well, it's great to have you back, Gene. People really appreciate your kind of detailed and nuanced knowledge of Navy operations and what's happening in deep underground military bases. So I wanted to uh, go over an incident that you mentioned to me last time, and we didn't get a chance to discuss it on air, and that is that as an adolescent, you went missing for 3 days and you were taken by the Guardian Alliance for protection. So you want to tell us about that?
Yes, of course. So this occurred about this time of year when I was in seventh grade. I By that time I had been skiing, downhill skiing. It was before they had snowboarding and all that stuff. But I started skiing just after I started walking, around 2 years old, somewhere in there. And, by the time you're in seventh grade, I believe you're 12. So 10 years, I was pretty advanced by that time. There was no slopes in the ski area that I couldn't ski quite well. And so I skied alone. My parents were both ski patrol. So I skied all by myself. And, because of how I like to ski some really advanced slopes, my other sibling didn't care for that, preferred something more languishing, or easy. So I was always skiing by myself. And so in doing that, in those days, you go to the ski lift, you either had a Puma, what they call it, so like a pole with a platter you sit on, or you had the chair lift. And the chair lift, they had a double chair lift and a triple chair lift that the ski area was at. So as a single, you would get in the singles line and they would pair you up with other people. So I was in the double chair lift and I got paired up with a lady, a young girl about my age, and quite attractive. And I was interested. I was at that age of where you're coming to know yourself as a young man, and I was very interested. And I was hoping to have a girlfriend. Um, so we talked all the way up. She seemed very congenial and nice, uh, but could only ski the really, really almost flat slopes. So I said, I skied a couple runs with her and tried to help her get better. Of course, that takes years in skiing. I said, so it was towards the end of the day anyway. I said, so I'm going to take a couple advanced runs. Is there a way I could meet you again? And she said, yes, with a Christian group. And if you give me your address, don't you come up with your family? And I said, yeah, always this area, though. I'd like to go to other areas. This group you go with, do they go to the other areas? And she goes, all of them, yeah, because, all very close to each other. So I said, great. So how does this work? And she said, just be out in front of your house with your skis and poles and, all your gear and boots and all that stuff at 4 a.m. And the van will show up and pick you up. So that would be Saturday, the following Saturday. So I was ready. I got to bed very early on Friday, very, looking forward to get a good night's sleep, to be able to talk to her and right up to this, ski area and back down to a ski area I don't normally get to go to. She had told me which one was the one for that week. I liked that area. So I was looking forward to that and seeing her again. And I went to bed Friday at about probably 8 o'clock at night, because I have to get up at 4 a.m. or to be in Milan at 4 a.m. I have to get up at 3. So I figured 7 hours sleep, I should be good. Get up, get ready, get, dressed, all that stuff in your ski clothes with your long underwear and all that stuff. And, they used stretch pants back in those days with straps under your feet. So it was quite a deal getting dressed. So I went to bed. And the next thing I knew is at that time, I had a friend's older sister who would drive us to school, to the school we went to, because they had stopped busing services. And my friend was in my room telling me to get up. We had to go to school. And if, why am I not dressed and up already like usual and out in front of the house where it's going to be late? Hurry up. So I was like, it's Monday? Yeah. Where you been all weekend? I go, I haven't been anywhere. I went to sleep yesterday, Friday. Because yesterday was not Friday. I came into your room Saturday evening and see if you wanted to go skiing Sunday with us. I had a car that, he worked in a garage and he had a car. He would disconnect the speedometer cable so you didn't have the odometer readings, that we would drive up to some ski area. So that was another alternative I had to going to other ski areas. And I go, yeah, I'd love to go. He goes, well, why didn't you get me? I did. Like I said, I came down to your room. You weren't here. Only your dog. I had a big white, kind of like the one you see, but white and black. Almost the same markings, but she was a white and black Siberian Husky. So he said, you weren't here. So I, went to school that day, came back home, and then my father came home and he comes into my room. I have a bone to pick with you, which means a beating already. And I'm like, oh no, what now? Already the day didn't start great. And I'm kind of out of whack and trying to figure out what happened. He goes, why didn't you take out the garbage on Sunday night like you're supposed to for trash pickup on Monday? I go, and he just, started laid into me. And he goes, I came into your room Saturday to remind you, Saturday evening. And I also came into your room on Sunday and you weren't here. I'm like, yeah, I didn't say anything, back talk as they would call it. Well, if I wasn't here, why didn't you put out the trash? But it's like, you weren't here and you're supposed to do that, and on and on and on. So I had apparently, not been in my room Saturday or Sunday, even though I went to bed Friday and of course Monday morning until some short time before I had to go to school. When I woke up, I did not feel like I had slept from Friday at 8 o'clock in the evening till Monday morning at 5:30 or something, whatever it was, when it came and got me. I'm like, so it took me years to, way after all of my death experience, all of that happened, that I got in contact with a being. I'll just say it that way. Telepathically is kind of what you call it. It's more like tithing. She contacts me and she said, you were I was asking about that because it's a mystery of my life. What happened? She goes, we removed you. And I said, why? Because I wanted to meet that girl and go ski at that ski area. And she goes, to save your life. And I said, how would that? I don't understand. And she explained to me that priest, minister, whatever he was trafficking those children. And with my parents, my father, my parents were divorced by that time for years. I was living with him, with his new wife, and I was hardly noticed at all. That they wouldn't notice you gone from, or even care. And so they could have trafficked me, and he was planning on it. He had already learned that from the girl, and he was planning on trafficking me that weekend, and I'd have been gone for good. And so they said that I needed to have things. I was, things that would be coming in the future to let people know about certain things that were important they know. And that's why they took me off Earth and put me back, so that, when he saw I wasn't there, and I had no way to contact her before cell phones or any of that stuff. So it was just a dead end for me. And so they let me know that they took me off Earth to save my life.
Wow, that's a fascinating story. So that was an intervention by this guardian group of extraterrestrials that recognized that there was this honeypot operation that I guess you would call it the deep state church, the child trafficking organizations, that they had set you up. It was a honeypot operation, I guess.
Yes, it was. Young boys were at that time and I guess even now are more preferred by the upper elites. And I was a very in shape, because I skied all growing up. I rock climbed, I backpacked, I hiked. I was an incredible physical specimen at that time. Very, I guess, for a young man, very good shape and somebody they would be highly wanting.
Mhm. Well, this takes us into some of the topics that you discuss in your deep dive into the DUMS. It's we're going to look at the more recent paper, or the more recent deep dive that you did, and we're going to pick up from where you talk a lot about William Cooper. You cite his work, The Origins of the Secret Government. So you want to kind of like just introduce the audience to Bill Cooper and what was his importance in terms of revealing the secret government and his time on the briefing team for the commander of the Pacific Fleet.
Yes, Cooper was one of the very first people I've read about of materials he has. It started with Behold a Pale Horse by Milton William Cooper. By that time, he had already had, I believe, one attempt to kill him by running him off a road. He later had another one, and then finally they did kill him for revealing all of these materials, the dumps and alien groups and all kinds of things that he revealed. And he did quite a few books and materials on all of that. And when I first woke up, the Federalist Conspiracy was a videotape somebody handed me, the truth of it, which is the truth of the IRS and the Federal Reserve, and then Operation Vampire Killer 2000, and by Officer Jack McLam, Behold a Pale Horse, and Dr. Coleman's book, Committee of 300, were the first things I ever went into in understanding this worldwide cabal, deep state, satanic group of individuals that, to have it outside of a library I can't remove things from. I woke up to it and I was going into the library at downtown Honolulu, the Supreme Court Law Library, but those are big, huge archives you can't pull books out of. And I looked up executive orders, for example, executive orders for FEMA to take possession of all properties. That's an executive order in the case of an emergency, or to round up everybody and put them in camps. It's not worded that way, but directly that way, but it's essentially what it states. And then now with what we see with Doge, that's, I'm hopefully, is going to go away. And so in the process of that, wanting to have materials I could carry and have reference when people ask me, and then additionally having the high clearance at that time and standing command duty officer, I had to inventory every safe for our command, and I would have to go page check everything. And if I'm going to page check it, I didn't originally used to read every page. I said, well, since I got all access to all these top secret safes, I might as well page check them utterly. I'll read every page. So I would take other people's duties. So I was standing duty quite often. Actually, people would love to have that. You do that so they could have more time off, even though you're on shore duty, and they pay me a little something along the way. And then I get a lot of information time where I could go in and read these top secret documents. And so through all of that with Cooper and, of course, Dr. Coleman, who I got to meet in Hawaii, and Jordan Maxwell later also in his books, and then my climbing skills, because I was researching the dumps because of Cooper, and I got to the corner of Kaina Point and I saw the big, huge entrance with the grate over it. So then the following weekend, I climbed Kaina Point and got to the top where I told you about that story, where two Marines in a gray Jeep took me and my student off of Kaina Point, said it's a top secret facility. We're not allowed to be there. And it's interesting. I'm watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. right now. It's incredibly informative, a lot of information in there. And they actually talk about kind of point tracking, top secret tracking facility as a new facility. It wasn't. It's not new. It was there in 1990. So, and it's interesting. It's in a lot of movies. So, in all of that, my original big focus was, because Cooper focuses on it a lot, of what is in the dumps, the negative alien groups, the technologies, and all of this. So I started really, really researching that. And when I retired, I really traveled all over the country looking for things, as I've mentioned before, and going into other materials as well, like Phil Snyder.
Now, you want to tell us about the Bilderberg Group, that they actually form a secret world government that controls everything. And if we do the screen share, Jazz, there's a page from your deep dive paper where you make a comment about the Bilderberg Group. You say, yeah, I don't know. Can you read that, Gene? Do you want to read that out?
Sure. In actuality, the creation of the Bilderbergers was exactly a creation of the satanic deep state, so that they could use the alien technology and resulting needed domes to have a base in which to rule the world in their, quote, new world order, quote, in. This has been the long dreamed of rule of the world by the Satanists over humanity, to be done for all time, and to literally lock down and forever enslave the human race into 15-minute concentration, slave labor, and adrenochrome harvesting camps. The UN was their second attempt after the League of Nations, that was stopped by the Tsar of Russia, which led to the execution of the entire lineage of the good rulers of the Russian homeland. The UN is nothing but the skeleton structure for the one world order, otherwise known as the New World Order. And I will say, Bilderberger Germany is where they came from. It's a bunch of world level bankers and other Satanist creatures.
Okay, so these globalists, they really do have a kind of satanic agenda to just kind of like cut humanity off from any kind of self-rule, and just make sure that humanity is kind of like concentrated in these slave labor camps and so forth. That's their agenda. Even though on the surface, you have these organizations like the League of Nations, the United Nations, all sounding very positive. So yeah, I guess that explains why Cooper and others were very suspicious of the United Nations.
Yes, and they love to do word games. So you see UN, United Nations, peacekeeping forces, but it also means unpeacekeeping forces. And they quite often, just like NATO, and wherever they go, wars come up, wars result. So we see that now with US aid and what the Doge, Trump, Elon are doing with that. And they say US aid, it's actually not US aid, but the letters stand, for the AID or for something else. But if you break it differently, it said, you said. So they play these games like for the, I think it's the Grammy Awards, the National Academy of Theater and Cinema. I think it is. There's something for the S at the end. So if you switch the letters around, you get Satan. So this is how they play word games, and they play this on us. So they're doing controlled information release, because in their way of understanding, they have to tell you what they're going to do. And if you disregard it, even if they tell you backwards, they still believe they told you. That they have to show you up front. And if you don't do anything or say anything against it, that's tacit consent.
Yeah, it's very diabolical how they do that. You also talk about President Eisenhower and his biggest mistake being to give the Rockefellers control of the alien issue. So I guess Eisenhower was someone that wanted to delegate, and he delegated to the wrong people, and they just kind of ran with the alien issue. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so he actually was a president that met with a group. Unfortunately, he signed with a wrong group at Holloman Air Force Base. And he was the group, the good group, wanted the world to disarm nuclear. And he didn't trust that. And then all the heads of all the governments of the world at that time that were nuclear, which was only, the US and USSR, I believe, at that time, would not go there. So he signed with the other group, which is the Negative Alien Agenda group, and then they started an agreement to have these deep underground bases. They would help us build them, and they would get certain ones and certain levels of certain ones, like Dulce. They would have the lower levels, and that's the story of Phil Snyder. Talks about how he got burned in a firefight, showed scars on his chest and his shoulder, and lost 2 fingers on one hand because of that firefight, where they stumbled on a lower level, I believe is what happened, where a section where it was for the grays. And so he wound up getting pulled out of there. The guy saved his life, but quite several people died in that firefight. And Eisenhower became aware of the rise of the military-industrial complex, and that this agreement was not being upheld. They were going to be able to abduct and return certain people after they memory wiped them, and they were supposed to let the government of the United States know what people, and they had a number of exact certain ones. They could do cow mutilations, but not to mutilate people and do experiments on people and those kind of things. And Eisenhower found out all of that was happening. They broke the treaty in every possible way. So he was threatened to send the U.S. Army to Dulce, and also to another base in deep underground facility near Yucca Mountain in Arizona, to deal with the group that had broken this, and of course the military industrial complex, to find out what's really going on in those dumps.
Called the Trilateral Commission. And in your deep dive paper, you discuss their symbol. And here it is on the screen share, this kind of symbol. You want to tell us exactly how is that insignia for the Trilateral Commission related to gray aliens that the Eisenhower administration had made a deal with?
Yeah, so their craft bear the symbol. It's not just the Trilateral Commission, it's also a symbolic rendition of 666, which of course is a number that they favor quite heavily because of its biblical significance. And then now technological significance as well, but it's on their ships. And what it symbolizes for them are the 3 main groups that most people now know: the Orion Syndicate, the Greys, and the Mantas, I believe it is, are the 3 main upper groups now. The third group goes in and out of it. So this is a symbol of the 3 groups of the Orion Syndicate that is the ones that Eisenhower signed with.
Okay. Right. So now there was an agreement with the gray aliens to build underground bases and joint bases for technology exchange, and you do kind of discuss that. I got a part of it highlighted. Do you want to read that highlighted part?
Absolutely. And this is what I was mentioning previously. It was also agreed that bases would be constructed underground for the use of the alien nation, and that 2 bases would be constructed for the joint use of the alien nation and the United States government. Exchange of technology would take place in the jointly occupied bases. These bases these alien bases would be constructed under Indian reservations in the Four Corners area of Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado, and one would be constructed in Nevada, in the area known as S4, located approximately 7 miles south of the western border of Area 51.
Right. So now we know that agreements were reached with aliens, Greys, and underground bases were built where the Greys would conduct some of their experiments. So this takes me to some of Cooper's comments concerning batch consignments of human slaves. But unfortunately, at this point, because we are getting into kind of censorship waters with YouTube, we'll have to kind of like say goodbye to the YouTube audience, and they can go to Patreon or Rumble to watch the rest of this interview. So let's have a look at what Bill Cooper had to say about batch consignments of human slaves. I mean, you discussed that in your paper. I'm just scrolling forward to it. It's getting there very soon, page 78. Okay, here we go. So page 78. I got where he discusses these it was page 73. Sorry, I went a little too far. Okay. All right, so 73. Let's see. William Cooper discusses these batch consignments. So you want to talk about the batch consignments of human slaves that were taken to the bases?
Yeah, so this taking of groups of human beings and other various, what they would term biologicals, for experimentation, batch consignments for the negative alien groups, is for slave labor, genetic engineering, like in Dulce, where they have hybrids of Greys and humans. And now we see whistleblowers coming out about craft that they came upon, I believe, in South America, and they were let to know that the big, huge containers had people in them. So that's with a craft that was non-gravitational or anti-gravitational, so hovering, in other words. And these are part of the ongoing batch consignments. And the group of the government actually broke away as I guess you would say, another civilization, where you've got several secret space programs, the NAZI, plus the deep state of the Fourth and Fifth Reich, and other groups that have their own secret space programs that do these batch consignment, human slave, sex trafficking, and genetic experimentation in their underground bases.
And then this was all part of the alternative 1, 2, and 3 program that the elites had come up with in the event of some kind of catastrophic series of events. And alternative 3 was where the batch consignments was mentioned.
Yes. And of course, now the outcome of that is what they are calling Alternative 4 or Operation Bluebeam, which they've tried several times. Like we heard talk of the face snatchers down in, I think it was Peru and other parts of South America, and it didn't work out because the Alliance is stopping much of this type of attempt at creating a new world order.
Yes, the Pelacaras from the Peruvian Amazon, lots of stories about their behavior down there, and of course snatching human children. So I wanted to ask you, Gene, about the deep state using human children as slaves and abusing them in nefarious ways. at these dams such as Dulce. So if we put image 3, Jazz. So yeah, Gene, do you want to kind of talk about the Dulce base
Yes,
and children being used there for various nefarious agendas by the Satanists running that base?
yeah, so a big part of Dulce just looks like power generation on the surface, and other materials. I have pictures of it. Oh, just a power network, in a mining area, and that no, it's not. They hide all this always that way. So Dulce has quite a few levels. When you get below essentially level 3, it becomes quite a bit of a nightmare. So your upper level is security and communications and those types of things. And they actually, to go into the lower levels, you get completely stripped naked. You have to be weighed and scanned with all kinds of devices to make sure you're not bringing anything in. And then the same thing is done when you leave. They You put on a tunic or coverall, whatever you want to call it, and then you go into the lower levels. So these would be, you first go through the excess and labs, and then you go into the mind control experiments where they're doing genetic manipulation, both trying to create chimeras as well as super soldiers. And that's why they take children, because the mind is still developing, the child's still developing. They use all kinds of drugs and other materials and technologies, now AI implants, all of this to do what human beings can do anyway, through training and various direction and all of that by people who know how to do it already. Then you get into level 5. As you can see, this is the alien housing, and there are whistleblowers that have talked well how they're walking, and they will see in this level various types of non-terrestrials walking by, uh, most of them telepathically communicating with them. And then you get into the nightmare stuff at level 6 with the genetic experimentations, the various types of chimeras, and things even worse. And then you go below that into where they got what they wanted, and they take it and put it in cryogenic storage so they can use it for blue beam, in other words, alternative 4 and other things. And now it actually goes below that, and you can see there's in the middle part that's a elevator system, and so it goes all the way down into you can see on the side a shuttle, but that goes to Los Alamos, which is near Santa Fe, New Mexico. But at the same time, the lower elevators go down into where nuclear submarines can dock and pull up, and these can power this entire facility by taking on shore power cables and reversing the powers. The story I've told about how that happened in Hawaii with the New York City 688 class submarine. And then additionally, they can also transport the materials without being noticed at all.
So, I mean, Dulce is in New Mexico. It's quite out there in terms of that Four Corners area. So these nuclear-powered submarines, I mean, does the tunnel system extend all the way to the Pacific?
They go from the Atlantic, the Gulf, and the Pacific. They interconnect and into the Great Lakes, so they can wind up going up into the Great Lakes, surfacing, or not surfacing, surfacing out of the tunnel system, but being still submerged and going out through the Great Lakes into the passageways there out into the Atlantic Ocean. Or they can connect directly into the Columbia River Basin, which has a vast river underneath it, or the Mississippi also has another river system under it. All the aquifers are just vast underground rivers flowing to the sea as well. And actually, the Everglades is a river moving at about 2 knots, a very, very slow drift to the sea. And so underneath all of those aquifers is a huge river system that interconnects throughout the entire continent. And they have tapped into that, developed deep underground waterways for the nuclear submarines to use. So if you look at nuclear training for the U.S. submarines, for the nukes to train, most of the training facilities are lakes inside the continental United States, and they have submarines in there. And one wonders, how did you get a big, huge nuclear submarine and nobody noticed? And you got it there by how? A truck? I mean, that is a huge vessel. Even the training ones are very large. They say, yeah, we trucked it in, flew pieces, assembled it there, all that. That's not really true. They brought them underneath the continent in there.
So these underground river systems that extend all the way through the US into the Atlantic, Pacific, and the Gulf, I mean, they must be pretty big and pretty deep to be able to have nuclear powered submarines kind of navigate their way through these things, to different locations.
Well, they don't have to be they're deep, but they don't have to be that big, because with the high frequency sonars, you have sonars that operate at such a high frequency that they could read Braille. They could read a Braille book, for example. You can see the raised dots. You can see, if you have a plaque, for example, that you often see on statues, and it has raised lettering and an image of the guy that's the statue above, like his face or something, and telling the history of, say, Andrew Jackson or something like that. The sonar can actually, with sound, get a picture of that plaque. So they can navigate, they can see the distance and see incredible detail and navigate underneath the ocean with these sonars quite accurately. The Russians, as you saw in the movie Hunt for Red October, have completely learned the Atlantic Passage in a deep under a bottom of the ocean trench that they would go to avoid detection and being caught, and things like you saw with Red October, which is actually just disclosure. That actually is the very first of the Beret class. And so as we go into the U.S. submarines, of course, they have the same technology, because the U.S. and the Soviet Union shared everything, including their moon bases, all of this. The Cold War, as I learned, was not real at all. It's all a setup by the bankers. And the Soviet Union, when it fell, was the Russians throwing off the bankers' control. And they have been out of their control for quite a while. Why they always are against the USSR, against Russia, because that country is key to the New World Order not happening. And we now see that happening, where Putin is working with Trump quite closely. And so they have these same facilities as well. So, for example, you can go from the boot part of the tip of Italy to CERN, go underneath Europe, up through a river system that's under a regular river, up and come out, well, not come out, but wind up in Lake Geneva. And you pass through and stop at CERN if you wanted to on a submarine with this kind of technology and sonar and navigational abilities.
Alex Collier in the 1990s, he said that a preferred food source for approximately 2,000 alpha draconian reptilians that were hidden in these underground locations. And so, when we're talking DUMBs and the alien quarters, I mean, this could be that would be one of the places where these draconians could be hidden. According to Alex, the children are regularly sacrificed by the deep state to the Dracos in accordance with these ancient agreements. And the agreements dictate that the Draconians would be given a steady supply of young children that the Draconians would use as a food source, and they then would not come to the surface to harass or frighten the surface population. So, yeah, I mean, what do you know of that?
Yeah, so David Icke interviewed Credo Mutua, who talked about how they used to come and grab people in South Africa, and that had dropped down due to these agreements by various countries that and their elite government deep state leadership that came to these agreements with them. So the children are used because they give two compounds when they're terrified. So they do hunting parties with children, and then for the young Draco warriors, they will actually hunt super soldiers. It's part of the reason they make the super soldiers a worthy adversary. So they'll be armed and they go out hunting expeditions, and it trains the young Dracos on how to hunt. And it's part of the passage into adulthood for a young Draco to be able to, have a worthy adversary, something like what you see with the movie with, I believe it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, where he hit a non-terrestrial that was doing the same thing to his special forces team. He was out hunting them and had all this technology and things that he was learning how to use, going through the rites of passage, so to speak. So they don't just get the children. The children are used because, of course, they physically eat them. Plus, they harvest the adrenochrome and, even more importantly, the chromochrome, which is from the pituitary gland. The growth hormone, when it's oxidized, becomes a very powerful substance that the Draco need to be on Earth. And then, because the frequencies of Earth are going into a change which is very detrimental to them in the way they vibrate. So the warriors, the super soldiers, and these are sacrificed. And the top soldiers and elites in any contract, the NAZIs learned this in World War II. They made a contract to get a base on the moon, and they thought that it was an honor when they got this base built. They had, I believe it was 90 of their top SS elite soldiers were in a circle in this facility on the moon. And I guess that actually the mustache man was there. You know who I mean. The number 88 is the letter representation of that gematria. So they had them all in this kind of amphitheater on a kind of like in an arena. And this doors opened and the Draco warriors came out and tore them apart. It's to sign an agreement. You have to sacrifice the best of your best, or in combat, that you're a worthy person to be having a contract with. That's how the Draco look at it. So they ripped 90 of them apart. The NAZI Third Reich at the time were quite horrified, but now have adapted to the point of that being part of their own ritual.
Now, there was a book written about one of these super soldiers, a Singaporean super soldier, Stephen Chua, and this is something that Elena Danan wrote a book about him. She interviewed him just before he died, and put out his story. But he describes one incident where he and some special forces that they were part of a kind of Earth elite, even though he was associated with the Singapore government and military. He collaborated with others to go to places where you had these reptilians harassing villagers, abducting children, and so forth. So, I guess you already talked about super soldiers and the reptilians kind of like fighting them. But I guess in this case, Stephen Chua, he described holding his own against these three Draco reptilians that his kind of small squad intercepted.
Their rite of passage to see if in these situations they actually cause these to happen on purpose so that they can, the young warriors can be trained. So whatever he was up against obviously was in a Draco. If you don't survive the rite of passage, then you go through the same game with the adults, and they just tear you apart because you are not a warrior. They are a species that are very conquest oriented, and if you can't survive it, you don't deserve to survive it in their point of view. So you're just a training tool then.
This takes us now to a lot of people talking about US or Earth Special Forces or the Earth Alliance being used to clear out these deep state controlled dumbs in the new Trump administration. So, do you want to talk about how that is proceeding? Given the balance of forces that are involved.
Yes. So currently, what is people can see the comms, but they're not grasping it. With Trump saying about Greenland, Canada, Mount McKinley, now Denali, now renamed Mount McKinley, and L.A. What happened in L.A. And so this is all tied together, and the Panama Canal. So this is all part of a network that goes from a facility that's under the ice and the ground in Greenland that requires 4 genetic keys to get into, that then is connected underneath the oceans and the land into Northwest Territories in Canada. Then it goes to Mount McKinley, which has a black pyramid inside it with high-end technology. Then it goes down to Mount Haynes in Alaska. Then it goes down to LA. It goes over to the Finger Lakes and up into the upper parts underneath the pipelines for Canada that sends its oil to the US there. It goes up under those pipelines up into Canada underneath the Great Lakes, which is a massive dump facility there. And it also from LA goes down through the Gulf of California. You can see what I call the coat hanger base. I've shown pictures on dumb decodes of that. That's in the Gulf of California on the bottom of the ocean. From there, it goes to Panama. And so this is an interconnected high-end technology, and it's part of the Drackle system originally. The alliances pretty much, for the most part, used the opportunities like with LA. They cleared out some of the tunnels and revealed caverns and caves when the burnout happened. And so the alliance, okay, you're going to do this, we'll use it to our advantage. So they went in and got into the cave systems and the tunnel systems, and they rescued children. Of course, because the Drackles, we spoke about that, what they need the children for. They rescued children. And of course, it's connected to the Playboy Mansion and P. Diddy's mansion and all that. And the tunnel systems have been shown for P. Diddy's and all these elite. And Mel Gibson is going into this now as well. Well, it will come out sooner or later, I'm sure, about this huge network of underground systems. And then from Panama, it goes out to Haiti. And so if you follow the comms carefully and understand what you're seeing, including 2 recent plane or helicopter, plane, or missile, 2 missile strike comms. That's all comms. It's all a war between the deep state for these facilities and technologies with the alliance, which with Trump at the helm, along with Elon Musk 2.0 and other individuals, Putin and all this, they're cleaning it up. And you see, the tariffs and all of this to get us back into where we originally came from, constitutionally, a constitutional republic before 1871, without income taxes and all these taxes, excise tax, income tax, land, property tax. That's probably all going to go away. And the government had a surplus that was handed from McKinley. Again, why McKinley to Eisenhower, which Teddy Roosevelt, which the surplus was so vast, he created the national park system. And then later the elite got a hold of that and put dumps under the national parks for the chimeras there too. So everything is interconnected and both sides use everything. And so when we see these events happening, what you're seeing is comms and events in a war that has finally started to culminate into where the alliance that is helping Earth and the negative group that is helping the negative side of the crypto terrestrials like the Homo carpensis and these other groups, for us to become free, the human species.
Now, Bill Cooper, he described the Cold War conflict between the Soviet Union and the US as a charade. And if we just bring up the screen share again, Jazz, there's a highlighted area that describes that. Maybe you want to read that out, Gene, and then I want you to kind of like comment on whether that even applies today to the current Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Yes. So you want me to start it today or a public?
Today.
Okay. Today, cities exist on Mars, populated specifically. Today, cities exist on Mars, populated by specifically selected people from different cultures and occupations taken from all over the Earth. A public charade, or charade, depending on what part of the country you're from, of antagonism between the Soviet Union and the United States has been maintained over all these years in order to fund projects in the name of national defense. We are the closest allies. And so this is what I became aware of, like I have stated before, on my third submarine. It was a farce. I'm plotting the submarines for the Soviet Union all over the world. We know where they are. Then they obviously know I knew the technology was going back and forth, because if you look at the 688 class and then what the Soviets came out with, their submarine very shortly after the 688 class came out, their submarines look like a copy of it, and vice versa. We keep copying each other back and forth and back and forth. So you look at a Charlie class submarine. Wow, that looks familiar. It doesn't look like a Soviet submarine to me. It looks like ours. But we have things that later came back and forth and back and forth. So it's been now the alliance is in charge of Russia, the good guys. And I was saying this for 6 years ago in China too with Xi, but he has to walk a finer line because of what is called the Black Hand, which is commonly known as the Chinese People's Party, Communist Party of China, or some CPC. We know it as the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, but that is actually a deep state way of saying it. They call it the Communist Party of China. CPC is the correct term. So that is run by the Black Hand, which is the Lee family of the lower 13 families of the cabal. That being the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Carnegies, Dows, DuPonts, Millens, Kennedys, Lees, etc.
Okay, so then we can assume that even though on the surface you have this Ukraine-Russia conflict and NATO is using Ukraine as a proxy, that behind that you have this level of cooperation that you just described. And I think that's very important, especially when it comes to the claims that there are armies of clones that have been manufactured by the deep state that are being used in the Ukraine war. So if you put up image number 7, Jazz, so is this another example of wars being used to test new generation weapons, such as these cloned super soldiers, and the Soviets, the Russians are fighting against these kind of clones in the Ukraine war? Is that what's going on?
In Ukraine, people will think back to Vietnam, Korea, World War II. We saw footage all the time of what was going on in the war. Gruesome, incredible footage. Reporters on the ground. Do we see hardly anything like that from Chasiv Yar, for example, which is about ready to completely be taken over? Why does it take so long? Why does it all look like very conventional weapons when we know what the cabal has with LA, with Paradise, with Lahaina? Why are we seeing all this? And then we have the general that took over the facility at Chernobyl said he's not leaving until all the children are rescued. Then we have Trump with China, CHY''NA, those facilities for gain of function that were all over Ukraine. So the alliance is working with Russia, with the US, the white hats, and allowing the dark hats, the black hats, of course, have their agenda there. Again, it's like LA, where they have their agenda and they're laundering, Zelensky saying 200 billion. I never saw anything but 74. It's like, yeah, all your homes of millionaires and all this stuff. That at the same time, what we're seeing is a clearing out of the ground base of this group when they first came to Earth. So the group that originally came to enslave this Earth from the star system known as Scion, SCION. They used to hide it for a very long time as Zion, or the protocols of the wise men of Zion. The true name of Scion, from two planets, their home planets, Orion and Na, that they blew up trying to use technology that locks up a Merkabah field. So they learned how to use it later. And so that's their whole first starting place, is in that Caucasus Mountain region that runs down through Ukraine. And so it's their home base. It's where they first landed. It's where they built their underground facilities. The number of tunnel systems under Ukraine is, I've shown a map of it before, and it is beyond comprehension how many tunnels there are in there. And that's why the mustache men, the NAZIs, the Third Reich, were so interested in that area and had their wolf bases and all this stuff, which are underground facilities as well as on surface. And all of these non-terrestrial chimerid hybrid beings and clones and all this technology they're using to test it out in Ukraine. That's why it's grinding on and grinding on and grinding on. And, Trump is, thought he could end it in a day, and we don't see it ending in a day, yet we see the Middle East conflict at a standstill now, because it's very, very complicated what's going on. You got white hats, you got black hats, you got negative group, non-terrestrials, you got positive group, you got chimeras, you got all clones, you got everything in there. That place is the home of the nest of the worst when they first came to this planet eons ago. And so that is the battle for essentially their homeland. And it is incredibly rich in technology, let alone the rare earth cities Trump's now talking about, plus the black earth that it grows. They could say you stick a tire on the ground or a boot and it'll grow something. And he was shipping that back to Germany. And then also they had what they believe, the Third Reich upper group believed that was, of course, because that's where they landed, the home of the Aryan civilization. So they took women during World War II, called the Ahnenerbe Project, and had them forced to bear children by top SS officers. That's why in Canada you saw this guy get a standing ovation, and 3 times actually. And that's symbolic. That's comms. And he was part of this. And those children of the Ahnenerbe Project are who we now see leading the WEF and the EU. All of these various female leaders and male leaders that seem to have very little understanding politically, economically, of anything at all. Several other leaders have called them useless idiots in Russia, for example. I think Medvedev called them that, and that's pretty much what they are. They're the offspring of that Ahnenerbe Project. And so that is their design originally, was to rule the world from Ukraine. And they had built that up when they first came down in that part of the Caucasus Mountains. It goes all the way down from the Baltics down through in the Pontic Steppes and down to the Black Sea, as well as to the Carpathians in that area.
Information that you just cited there about Ukraine being this ancient repository for advanced technologies dating back to when ET groups kind of like established a foothold there, started seeding a kind of a new species of human there, or conducted a genetic experiment involving hominids there, that would support this idea, this information that there's a space arc in Ukraine, especially in the Kherson region. And I think we've talked about this in the past, but maybe you can elaborate on the connection between, if your information is also found that there was a space arc there.
Yes, and those were brought in case the Black Hats obliterated the planet. They could reseed it with, life that would be supportive of human beings again, and to save enough humans so that they could reseed this planet and bring us back up, because it has been done. This war is not the first rendition of this war on this planet. You look at the war between Atlantis and Lemuria, with the destruction of Lemuria almost complete, and the near complete destruction of Atlantis. And that happened twice. The final time was pretty much total. And it ripped the continents into where they currently sit within about 40 feet. And then we also have civilizations that have gone by the wayside, from the Uyghur civilization that was in the Gobi Desert, that was vast and very spiritually advanced, and were mostly working with sentient plants. That's what's the Voynich manuscript is talking about, I believe. And then you go into Hyperborea, which is another one of these civilizations wiped out. And I believe that was the beginning of the Pyramid Wars. They called it the Electric Wars at that time. And that's what's in Crimea. There's a whole massive amount of pyramids in Crimea that are activating that space arc that's in the Kherson region, and going down into a kind of a national forest area in the lower Donbass, just above Crimea. There's a smaller one there as well. And then also, again, and it's not just a coincidence, it's a coincidence, there's one in a certain area in Greenland, in Northwest Territories, in Alaska, so in underneath LA. Surprise, surprise. Like, there are no just happen to be that way. It's coincidence. And so we're seeing all of this now coming out, because we are in this battle, and now it looks like we're not going to get wiped to where the inner Earth have to come and reseed everything all over again. But that's the purpose. The inner Earth beings that are not subject to all this war and destruction over and over and over and over and over are galactic, and they're with this group. They are peaceful with this group that bought the arcs here.
Now, what do you make of this attempt by the Trump administration, the Doge that Elon Musk is heading, to cut off, or at least put the US Agency for International Development under the State Department, because the funding that was generating was being siphoned off into all of these covert projects. And so, and we've been talking about deep underground military bases and the various things that are going on. Is that where part of the money was being siphoned off to? And is this part of what Trump and Musk are doing to kind of like take on, dismantle the deep state?
Absolutely. So you said USAID was funneling money to the WEF and, of course, the NED, National Endowment for Democracy, are both hand in hand part of this, and various other NGOs for the color revolutions all over the world that the CIA, had trouble previous to these organizations being created funding. So they funded these, and the CIA, of course, is an outgrowth of the OSS through Project Paperclip, became what we know as Clowns in America, or Central Intelligence Agency. And so in all of this, it is finally the dismantling of this worldwide cabal that's been here for thousands and thousands of years. And it's finally actually working. We see his first term was to ferret out the rat lines. and all the interconnections and everybody. So now a lot of the people within the government, within these agencies, have had their security clearances removed and also have orders they cannot step on federal properties. Buildings can't go into them, etc. That means you're under investigation. And we have a reporter talking at Courthouse 3 is being built in a very large courthouse and more holding facilities for high level illegal immigrants. In other words, that are terrorists and multiple offenders in Gitmo. Well, that means somebody who's not born in the US, right? Was Barry Soetoro born in the US? Was Kamala born in the US? Or Kamala, born in Beirut? How about Biden? Where was he really born? So you go back through these presidents, senators, majority of senators too, have changed their names and are not born here. A lot of them are part, again, of the Ananurbe Project. So if you're talking high-level repeat offenders, well, 2 terms, vice president, president, or president twice, and you're not a born citizen, that's a high level. What I just said, right? So they could be sent to Gitmo. People aren't catching the comms. It's really obvious to me. So it's like, I got it. So like what happened with the aircraft explosion and the helicopter, the Black Hawk, that's obviously nobody's on there. And it's being steered by somebody who's, Lockheed Martin developed the technology to remotely steer a Black Hawk, and it's going all over the place. It's almost colliding into many things as it's going up the river because the people aren't very good on it yet. It's new technology, and then it crashes into that. And I'm looking at the fact, just like we saw with 911, that there's an aircraft allegedly that landed half an hour earlier with that exact same flight number. If we look at the number of that tail of that plane, we see that that is a Senate resolution for evaluating the US dollar compared to gold, how much it's worth in gold today. In other words, looking towards heading into Nasara. And then we say Russian, US, ICE, skaters. And then we see the Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan crying jag thing being pulled back up, and a very, to me, crocodile tear, nothing worthy of Hollywood kind of example of certain things being said. Is what we're being shown what really happened? Or is it like what we've seen with 911 all over again? What is an ICE skater? Were they on that plane? Or are we being given comms? So there's a lot of things going on. Then we see a hole that's the size of a Volkswagen Beetle about in another supposed aircraft taking a nosedive. And it looks to me, another footage I've seen, like 2 missiles. And then we're shown a unburnt part of the plane that doesn't even have any charring to the paint or anything. And yet the fireball, when that thing hit, and that's what they came up with. Looks like you cut that out of something, tore it out of something, and then shipped it there to me. This all looks like deep state and white hats back and forth, showing things and giving comms and doing operations for a war. We're seeing a war, and we're not being told precisely what's going on. Back to you, Dr. Sala.
Right. Well, in terms of this deep dive paper that you wrote, you estimated that there are roughly 500 DUMBs in the United States and 5,000 worldwide. Many of these were deep state, controlled by these Satanist organizations. But of course, the White Hats, the Earth Alliance, working with positive extraterrestrials, have been liberating these for some time. So at this moment in time, February 2025, what's the nature, or what kind of percentage of these dams are still under deep state Satanist control as opposed to those that are, been liberated?
Yeah, the problem with giving percentages, first they were going really, really fast and had a majority of them. Like we see in Ukraine with like Robotinya, for example, it went back and forth and back and forth. Russian has it, Ukraine has it. Russia has it, Ukraine. This is what happens in war, is things go back and forth and back and forth. Then we had the Ashtar Command that pilfered like the ones they had helped clear for their own purposes. And so then those had to be taken back again. And so you have, it's a war back and forth and back and forth. So the big ones that are very important are being held pretty solidly, which is CERN, the two in the Finger Lakes, of two of the Finger Lakes domes, the under the Great Lakes, and the facility that's in Greenland, Northwest Territories, Mount Haynes, and Mount McKinley. Those are huge and very important facilities. And then also Pine Gap. So those are the main ones, of course, that are so very important that they took early on, that and they've had to retake, but now they're making sure to the best of the ability in any war, can you absolutely say you can't have it taken away from you again? No, you can't, not until and that's why the Russians in Ukraine are taking a slow, methodical procedure, and they have essentially, as far as third, fourth, fifth generation warfare goes, demilitarized the US, the UK, the Five Eyes, and the EU and Ukraine. And in Ukraine, they demilitarized it to the point where it doesn't matter what weapon you send there, there's no people to use it. Because when Zelensky said okay, we're going to start doing 18 to 25, they've already been doing them. Russians have already had whole battalions of mostly 18 to 25-year-olds surrender because to get 3 days training, they don't want to be up there. They were taken off the streets. So this is what we see in war. You say, this is going to be, we're going to do, that means you've already done it. And so this is the same thing we see here. So, I know what the percentages were, but in any war, you can't rest on that until you demilitarize the other side, which means you've taken them out entirely. So we're heading towards that, but there's still, you don't take out something that's been dug into the earth in alternative dimensions even for thousands and thousands of years.
Yes, agreed. And of course, I mean, we've been hearing about these dams being liberated over the last few years, but now with the Trump administration being in power and the Earth Alliance having kind of like more resources and special forces to clear out the dumps, I imagine it's going to move much more quickly now.
Yeah, much more quickly. So, until they got these higher end technologies from the Alliance and other areas, the secret space programs, the inner Earth peoples, and all that have all joined together to do this, it was slow and plodding. Now we're going quickly, and I do believe now with the inner Earth technologies, the galactics, and all of this, they're going to hold what they have, and they're going to keep what they have. And with the Trump administration in and doing what they're doing, that's so obviously destroying the deep state. It's obvious that they're on the run, and as we say in martial arts, they're on the ropes, or in a boxing match, they're on the ropes and they're going down because they're doing wild swinging, and they're missing their mark, and they're essentially, the people they've got running things are just not very intelligent. It's like I was listening to one of the Kennedys, and he was saying, I think it was Biden speaks two languages, English and stupid. So it's what we see. These people that they have left, the middle level management, the upper's gone for the most part. And then the upper of the upper has been gone quite a while. So it's the mop-up situation. But in any mop-up at the end of the war, that's when it can get the worst. So if you look at the wars we know, based on the history, we know as accurately as we can, in World War II, when the Allies were in Germany, And I'm reading a book about the Russians coming into Germany at the time and how devastating and how ferociously the Germans fought for the homeland at the very end, and how bloody it was, and how some of the worst losses for the Allies was at that time. The most at the in a very short period of time, and the fighting was the most horrific of all. So we're seeing that now, like with what's happened in LA. The alliances learned a lot, so we're not seeing massive losses that we like a World War, where you see thousands of civilians being murdered in vast destruction of properties and all of this. That is evident, but we do have losses that people don't attribute to things because they're hidden, like warp speed. And what actually the combination of what that was all about is very complicated, but we're getting losses from that now too. Back to you, Dr. Saul.
Right. Well, so yes, that pretty much completes, my review of your paper, Dumb's the Underground War: An In-Depth Introduction for a Full Understanding, Part 1. So, is there a Part 2 that's in the process? So, do you have an idea when that'll come out?
Yeah, I had my computer crash and I lost half of it. And then somebody found a half of the half I lost, but it's in an archive of almost 900 pages. I'm going to have to dig and rebuild it. So, probably mid to late March, I'll have the Part 2 redone again. I was almost done. I would have had it this coming week, but my computer had to be completely expunged, and all the files had to be recovered, and I couldn't recover everything. So I am looking to, and I will prioritize that for myself to try to get that done as soon as I can, but I'm looking at mid-March to late March.
Okay, well, that would be great. Mid-March, late March, we can talk about that. Will you be discussing crypto terrestrials in Part 2?
Series of things. As I said, I've lost track of where I am, so I don't know right now.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to thank you, Gene, for coming back and giving us more information about deep underground military bases, and what the state of the game is right now with the clearing of them and the removal of the deep state and the power. So thank you. And why don't you kind of like tell people where they can go if they want to learn more about you, if they want to do a deep dive onto your website and kind of read a lot of these articles that you've been working on for decades now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sala. Yes, my website is genedecode.org. And there's a free section, the surface area, and then the paid areas, the deep dives. And then that's $7 a month or $77 a year. And then I have a Rumble Real Gene Decode, and I'm Real Gene Decode on Truth Social and on Telegram, I believe. And so then also all of my past old interviews, we're going through and editing them all for copyright to make sure we're copyright compliant, and putting them up on my free website, blessedforservice.org.
Well, thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Dr. Sala. God bless.